Hello and welcome from our class in the bunker once again. And because we are recording this on Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day to all of you who are out there and hopefully enjoying this. Two pieces of housekeeping, if you will. Number one, I've been getting questions as people have been following along in their Bible, and they're still saying, wait a minute, what you're reading is a little bit different than what we're reading. Just a reminder again that the quotes that you're going to be hearing today are coming out of the Thomas Wayment New Testament translation for LDS for Latter-day Saints, published both jointly by BYU, Maxwell Institute, and by Deseret Book. Completely approved, and we love it a lot. And it'll make all of this a lot clearer. I don't know about you, but I think for years I spent time in looking at the Gospels and enjoying the Gospels and everything that was there. Then when we got into the writings of Paul, it seemed to be kind of the territory of other faith traditions and didn't seem to resonate as much with us, partly because we couldn't understand it. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that a BYU professor has translated from the ancient Greek and had us have footnotes and things back to the Doctrine and Covenants and the inspired version and all of those that will make this much more clear and understand. So I would highly recommend, as you're trying to follow along here, that if you get a chance, you can get this on Amazon or just about everywhere else. Item number two. For the purposes of what we're trying to do with this online, we're going to do this just a little bit different today in that we're going to actually do it in two parts. I'm going to go about 25 minutes. We're going to have a break. You can use that as a potty break. You can use that as a chance to go get a sandwich, grab some Mother's Day meal, and then we'll start up again. If you're going to watch this later, what you'll see is a part one and a part two, so it's a little bit more bite-sized experience for you. So don't be surprised when we get to that point. Okay, now as we get started today, I want to kind of go back to a moment in our church history that is going to really be resonant with what is actually going on with Paul. We remember this moment in Nauvoo when Joseph Smith feels the noose closing around his neck, and he sees that more and more people are coming to attack him and to attack the saints, and he realizes that he needs to leave Nauvoo. And he makes arrangements. We know that he gets to the other side, the west side of the Mississippi. We remember that story where Emma and others ask him to come back. He does. He says, I'm going to be slaughtered, but I will go anyway. If I need to be able to be out of here in a way that they will be protected, I will be gone. But if they need me to come back, I will. Now, he does that. He goes halfway to Carthage. They tell him that they need to surrender the arms of the Nauvoo Legion. He rides all the way back. They surrender their arms, and then what we end up getting is this quote from Joseph Smith. Under the inspiration of the Spirit and just his own understanding of his entire situation. I am going like a lamb to the slaughter, but I am calm as a summer's morning. I have a conscience void of offense towards God and towards all men. This was a man that knew that his life was about to be over, and because of that, he was despairing. He knew he was doing right, but this is still a man riding to his death. And we're going to find as we go along here today that this is what is going on with Paul. He can feel the noose closing on him. He doesn't know exactly how this is going to work, but he knows that he is soon to die, and that that his life is about to be over. Now, as we do that, though, let's first of all go to the book of Romans 15, and this is kind of at the end of everything that we've spent over the last 3 classes. Can you believe that we've done 3 hours on Romans? Try and match that in any gospel doctrine class. That is awesome, and we're just scratching the surface, but at the very least we got that. So in Romans we get this. Now he says, as he's writing to those in Rome, "This is the reason why I was hindered many times from coming to you. I no longer have a place in these regions now." Doesn't matter where I go in Ephesus or they're out to get me. And I no longer have a place in these regions around the Mediterranean. And because I have desired to come to you for many years. This was always been his goal, is to get to Rome. Paul had this way of seeking out the population centers. And Rome would be the home run of home runs. So he is now going to say, I can't go anywhere around here. I'm on my way to you. But he has one more thing that he needs to do, and this was an injunction that was given to him by the pillars, meaning back in Jerusalem. In this case, meaning like Simon Peter, but also James, who was the bishop of Jerusalem. "I hope to see you as I travel to Spain." In other words, he was planning on actually going through Rome all the way to Spain. We don't know whether Paul ever made it to Spain. There's been some speculation that he did, but logistically it just doesn't seem possible. It seems most likely that he got to Rome and then was stopped. "As I travel to Spain, and to be helped by you on my travel, after I have first enjoyed your company for a while." I'm going to be with you guys. I get to stay with you. Then I'm going to hop on to Spain. "But now I am traveling to Jerusalem to minister to the saints." Why would he do that? Back when he was originally given his injunction at the original Jerusalem conference that he and Barnabas were going to go out and preach the gospel to all the known world in the Roman Empire. We sometimes forget that he was called as the apostle to the Gentiles, but he was giving a specific instruction by the church in Jerusalem to gather money for the poor. That's remarkable because that happened in the late 40s, we think 47, 48 AD. By the time we get to about 52, 53, 54 AD, a few years down the road, there is a drought that is settling down on Jerusalem. And this group of saints, members of the way, in Jerusalem and Judea and the Galilee, were really beginning to starve. They'd pooled all of their money and their resources, and it was being spent down. They had a large need among the widows and the poor. They were in dire straits. And so it was actually prophetic on the part of the brethren in Jerusalem to ask Paul in his travels to collect money from the people around the Mediterranean and bring that money back to Jerusalem and to the poor in Judea. That's going to provide a couple of interesting things that come up for us as we take a look at this. So, now I'm traveling to Jerusalem to minister to the saints. For Macedonia, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Achaia are pleased to make some offering for the poor among the saints in Jerusalem. And I love this explanation behind that. For they were pleased to do it. And they are indebted to them, the Jerusalem saints. For if the Gentiles had come to share in their spiritual blessings, the covenants of Abraham, they ought to share in their material things, he says. Therefore, after I have finished this and have delivered to them this gift, this financial gift, he says, I will pass by you on the way to Spain. Wow. Okay, I find it fascinating if you actually kind of think about this. In some ways, this echoes a little bit kind of what we get from King Benjamin. Remember, as King Benjamin at the temple is trying to teach his people and trying to have them become sons and daughters of Christ, and trying to have them born again and get a new heart. It's interesting that he attaches in Mosiah 4, for the sake of retaining a remission of your sins from day to day, which I think they would be interested in doing, that ye may walk guiltless before God. He says, I would that ye should impart of your substance to the poor, every man according to that which he hath. It seems to be part of the covenant-making process and part of the community of Christ that we take care of our poor. One of the hallmarks of Zion under Enoch was that there was no poor among them. One of the major sins of Sodom and Gomorrah was the fact that they starved their poor. And we have joked a number of times in class that you can always tell when a city in the New World or the Old is about to be destroyed, because they will turn their back on the covenants and they will starve their poor. The minute you starve the poor, it's over and you're going to be run out of town. Usually by armies that will destroy your city and destroy your temple. This idea of retaining a remission of our sins by imparting our substance to the poor is something that I don't know that it's always there. I don't know that we always completely connect how it is that that works and why it is that the Lord puts so much emphasis on that. But he does. His own ministry was about imparting of his spiritual substance to the poor, imparting of his love and caring and taking care of the poor. And I think for Paul, as he's going around to each one of these and building up these churches, he is emphasizing over and over and over this need to collect money and financial support that he can now take back to Jerusalem. He can't yet go to Rome until he's completed what they asked him to do, which was collect the money. Now, that's easier said than done in the first century. As he's going to start with his face towards Jerusalem, he's going to find out in Acts 20, because the Jews, and it's interesting that he specifically says it's the Jews, and we're going to find out very soon who those are. Because the Jews had developed a plot against him, he was intending to travel to Syria, the Near East. He was intending to get to Antioch and that area. He decided to return through Macedonia. Now, I happen to believe on Paul's part, this is him wanting to go and visit some of his favorite saints in Philippi. That was the place that he felt the most home and the most loved. The Philippi saints had a very special place in Paul's heart. And I don't think you were going to have to talk very hard to him, because coming up he's going to plan to do two things. Passover is about to come, and I think he wants to spend Passover with his beloved saints in Philippi. And then he's got 50 days to go to Pentecost, and he wants to get the money to the Jerusalem saints by Pentecost, 50 days later. So, with that in mind then, and here's the group he's going to take with him. And we might just read over this quickly, and if we were in gospel doctrine, we'd hand it to somebody to read, and they're going to stumble over these words, and we're thinking, why are we doing this thing? Okay? And Sopater, son of Pyrrhus, and Berea, and Archicus, and Secundus from Thessalonica, and Gaius from Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychicus, and Trophimus, and all these. We're going, okay, why do we need to know these people? There's a very specific reason why. And that is theologian and New Testament scholar N.T. Wright has pointed out very well that as he went back and researched who these people were and where they were coming from, we need to recognize that there are two things going on. Paul has a financial burden to take to the saints in Jerusalem. Now, two things. One, this ain't an easy task here. This is not like, well, we're going to put the money on a credit card, I'll hide it in my bag, and I'm going to haul this credit card to Jerusalem. The idea of taking a large financial gift through the ancient world and getting it safely to Jerusalem ain't an easy task. We don't know if he would have purchased expensive jewels, exactly how he would have done that. It could have been in coins. It could have been a lot of ways. Now, one guy all by himself with that kind of money would first of all be a target to thieves and anybody who might waylay him along the way, especially if it's kind of known all over the place that he's been collecting money, and money bags here might be a great target for a thief on the road coming through Troas. Secondly, if there are some dispersions, especially from the Jews, being cast on Paul, the last thing Paul wants to do is be carrying the money by himself. That would be crazy. How do they know he didn't skim some off the top like the tax collectors do? How do you know he didn't just take some off for himself? How do you know? Here's how they knew. This group, Sopater, Aristarchus, this group isn't just a random group of people. It's a delegation. And it's a delegation that each one of these people represent one of the branches of the church. It would be like taking from your home stake a large financial gift and giving it to another stake 2 states away. But in carrying the money forward, you appoint somebody from every ward to come with you, and this delegation will not only keep it safe, because now there's a group of you traveling together, but it also is this representative of, we have this gift and we're going to represent all the people who have given from our particular ward, our particular church. This is a delegation going to Jerusalem with this financial gift. Now, the craziest part about all this is that Luke never tells us the end of the story. It's obvious as we're getting set up. We know he's collecting money. We know there's a delegation being put together. They're going to go off to Jerusalem. They're going to give this gift, and we never get the final chapter from the writer of Acts. We don't know how that went. Whether it was well received, whether it was seen as blood money and we're not accepting money from these guys, whether they just said thank you, whether they held celebrations, we don't know. We just know this is very carefully being done to make sure. So, it says they all went, this delegation, including Paul, they all went and it says, and waited for us in Troas. Well, this is interesting because now for a little bit of a time, the writer of Acts has hopped back into the story. Probably located somewhere around Troas. This writer is now on there. So what we're going to see in the next little bit here is eyewitness testimony. That's why some of it's going to be a little bit more specific. This writer knew that these things had happened, saw them come into Troas with his or her own eyes. And then he says, we set sail from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. Now, can I... just for a second, I just kind of want you to do one of these picture things, would you? And that is, if the inspiration and guidance is coming to Paul that his life is about over, that the noose is tightening, he doesn't know how fast, but he knows that it's about to happen. We can picture that last Passover Seder with his beloved friends, knowing what's coming. It's about a week. They're going to celebrate for a week. And he has this last sweet time to be spent with his dear friends in Philippi. And then Passover completed, now it's on to Jerusalem with the gift to try and make it in time for Pentecost. Now, because we have an eyewitness, we get to see some little details that to me add some richness to the text that we're looking at here. So I want you to read carefully. He says, "We went ahead to the ship and set sail to Assos, intending to take Paul there, for he planned it in this way." But what was he doing? He says he was intending to go there on foot. Imagine Paul, it's like, oh, well, I have these people. They love me in these little branches all over. I'm going to walk down there, and we'll be able to walk down there. I can go to all of these old branches again. And it says, when he met us in Assos, we took him and went to Mytilene, okay? And we set sail from there. Let me say that differently. Paul was wanting to walk. We nixed that idea and put him on a boat. We may have had to put one arm on each side and haul Paul onto the boat. He wanted to go by foot. We put him on the boat. Because, again, didn't we say that there was a plot of the Jews against him? So, but he was going to do it anyway. We're saying, Paul, not only is your life in danger, but you're carrying a lot of money. We're putting you on the boat. Forget the walk. Now, so let me have you picture this for just a sec. And hopefully this comes up well. He's been down in Corinth here where he was writing to the Romans, down here, okay? Here's Athens over here. What he did is that because he wanted to get over here into Syria and ultimately to Antioch, but it was Passover. So now what he's going to do is he's going to travel up here and he's going to have Passover dinner in Philippi, up here, still in Europe, okay? And then he was going to walk. Here's what he said. He intended to do this by foot. I mean, here's Troas over here, okay? He may have come down here to Troas, but he says, you know what? I'm going to walk down through Colossae, over to Antioch and Lystra and Derbe. Remember, I've got some of those people with me, their representatives. I want to go to these old branches on my way down here to Antioch and ultimately down here to Jerusalem. Okay? So ultimately he was going to be here. They put him on a boat and said, oh, heck no, you're not going here. And actually what he's going to end up doing is he's going to end up going down here to Miletus. And it's just south of Ephesus. And this is where he's going to meet. But he wanted originally to walk down here, and they put him on this boat down here. And again, ultimately he wants to get down here to Jerusalem. Now, I think it's important that we understand what just happened here. Remember that if we read 2 Corinthians, this 2 Corinthians is Paul incredibly depressed. He said there was a sentence of death passed upon him, that he was going to have to, in either figuratively or literally, fight wild animals in Ephesus. He was imprisoned in Ephesus, even as long as he had preached there, which he did for years. Ultimately, he's going to be imprisoned. And you have to picture that Ephesus has become, for Paul, what Liberty was for Joseph Smith. A place of pain and suffering. There's a branch there, but for Paul, he can't go back. Either because it's not safe, or because maybe his own post-traumatic stress from the pain and everything of that says emotionally he couldn't go back to Ephesus. So what does he do? He needs, before he goes back down, all the way down here to Jerusalem, what he's got to do is he's still got to meet with the leaders. He's got to have a regional area conference with the church leaders from Ephesus. And so what we're going to find here is, in this conference, he's going to say, what he's going to do is he's going to ask them to come down and meet with him, which they do. Now we have preserved for us well the speech that Paul's going to give to these saints, these church leaders, the local leaders coming from the house churches in Ephesus, and they're going to come down here to Miletus, and he's going to say, you know, speaking to them, that from the first day which I arrived in Asia, how I lived with you at all times, how I did not withhold proclaiming anything that would be helpful, and from teaching you in public and house to house. Now he says, and now I am going to Jerusalem, compelled by the Spirit, not knowing the things that will come upon me there, except that the Holy Spirit witnesses that imprisonment and trials await me in every city. Now, this is going to have some important spiritual ramifications about what he's about to describe. Now, I'm going to put in a teaser here because we're going to take a bit of a break here. A chance for you to go get something to eat and come back. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about why this is so powerful and tells us exactly what it is that Paul was actually believing at this time. So we'll take a break, and this will end part 1.